So if you're watching this video, you want to get rid of psoriasis and you want to get it fully under control for good. I'm not going to call it a cure. I know people want a cure and they want a treatment. I'm going to tell you this is what you need to get your body in balance so you don't have psoriasis. Number one, get out in the sun. Number two, stop eating wheat, grains, oats, all those things. Stop eating dairy. At the same time, maybe try fasting, maybe don't. We'll talk a little bit about that. But fruit, you gotta remove fruit. It's too much on the digestive system for most people. And finally, I'm gonna talk at the end of this is, does psoriasis cause other autoimmune diseases? And throughout this video, I'm gonna walk you through why these things are so very important. And by the end of this video, you're gonna know exactly what you need to be doing to get rid of psoriasis. So when it comes to psoriasis, over the past really 30, 40 years for myself, having it, going through the process of getting rid of it and taking the medications and stuff that I had in the past and then going more of a natural route, but also by shooting videos on it for the last really year now, just shooting videos on psoriasis and autoimmune disease, and by working individually with a lot of you and a lot of other patients. With psoriasis, I've gotten to learn a lot, and I've gotten to learn what people have struggles with in terms of how to get better with psoriasis naturally. I've also got to learn different people's viewpoints. Some of them are fun, some of them aren't. But today's video, and the reason I'm coming in this starting point here, today's video, I'm gonna share with you guys some of the things that I found that can be the most effective things you can do for psoriasis, right? So kind of cut through all the other extra stuff that we talk about a lot of times, but also the most inexpensive things you can do for psoriasis. So today I'm gonna give you the number one thing I think that every one of us should be doing, really whether you have psoriasis or not, but if you do have psoriasis, this is gonna be one of the most important things. And just working with patients and talking to them, this is something that a lot of them are lacking. Okay, I'm also gonna talk about oats, wheat, and grains. That's been a big question. What types of grains can you or can't you eat? Which diet I found over working with patients has been the most effective. Is it carnivore? Is it keto? What kind of eating plan has become the most effective? I'm gonna talk about fasting. A lot of people are asking, should I fast or shouldn't I fast? And that's a really cool question. And there's a lot of good research and fun stuff on fasting. We're gonna talk about dairy. And so I'm gonna do kind of a Q&A here at the end of this. And what I mean by that is I'm gonna go back to the comments that people have left. So a lot of people wanna know about dairy, whether it's raw dairy or pasteurized, whether it's kefirs and yogurts and things like that. Should that be a part of an eating plan with someone that has psoriasis? I'm gonna talk about fruit. I know fruit is something that is very healthy for us, but if you have psoriasis, should you eat it, right? And then also psoriasis, does it lead to MS? Does it lead to Hashimoto's disease? Are those connected in any way, shape, or form? I'm gonna talk about that. That was a really big comment. We're gonna talk about sunscreen, vitamin D. We're gonna talk about infrared lights, all kinds of cool stuff on this video, okay? So make sure you stick with me as you go through it. Like this. Hey, click the notification button so you get all the videos that we shoot constantly coming out. And we're gonna be adding some cool stuff to the channel that won't just be about psoriasis. So I'm hoping you're gonna really enjoy that because it's really about being healthy, getting our body in balance, and that's how we heal from psoriasis anyways. So what's the number one thing that I believe all of us need to be doing on a daily basis, whether you have psoriasis or not, but this is very, very important for someone that does have psoriasis. And that number one thing is get outside into the sun. And it sounds like, oh, that's so simple. How could that be? And they've told us not to be in the sun for so many years. They've told us to, use sunscreen and all those things. But the truth is that the sun is very crucial for our health. I'm a big fan of what I call critical thinking. And what that means is I don't think God puts this thing on the planet or in our universe that's gonna kill us every time we go out into it. And I also think back in history, we didn't have these massive rates of cancer and skin cancer and all these other things. And actually people were really very healthy. And some of the healthiest groups of people are the ones that, tribes and things like that spend most of their time outside. They don't have teeth issues. They don't have a lot of these other health issues that we have today. And so not only do I like to critically think about stuff, I also like to look back at the science, the research, and what we know the sun actually does for us. Okay, so it has ultraviolet rays, and I know we've been told those are very harmful, and yeah, that's true. If you have too much UVB rays or too much UVA rays, it can absolutely denature cells. It can cause cancer. But what's interesting is that the sun releases ultraviolet B rays, okay, and other different types of light as well. But it does that, but it also releases infrared, near infrared light, and even though those ultraviolet B rays can denature cells in DNA and cause mutated cells, those rays also produce help us produce our vitamin D3. And that vitamin D, which is actually a hormone, not a vitamin, is very important for so many different functions in our body, from our bone strength to our immune response to our hormone production. And so the sun is actually doing that. Even though it's causing some denaturing of the cells, that infrared light that the sun releases actually helps build up collagen and helps regenerate cellular health and helps our mitochondria to have more energy inside that cell. So it's kind of like a thing, like the whole thing together is healthy for us. Whereas if you just take UVB rays from a light, that can be actually very damaging in return. And there's also an extent of how long and how much sun you want to get. I believe we should be outside a lot. I don't believe we should be bare-skinned in the sun for long, long periods of time unless our body has created, we call it our innate sunscreen, right? And so what do you think the innate sunscreen is? Your innate sunscreen is melanin. It's the color in our skin. So if you're a really, really white, pale person, don't go out in the sun for 5 hours, right? But if you're someone that's dark skinned, you've built up your sun tolerance because you're out there all the time, then you can spend multiple periods of time in the sun. Now, getting back to why that is so crucial for psoriasis and just overall health in general is it's the best overall way to get vitamin D3, number one. Number two, it's one of the best healthy things we can do for us at a cellular level. And also it affects us in terms of our brain, our eyes. When our eyes see the sun, it starts to produce melanin. So it's just really crucial part of just overall health. And so the reason it's so important for psoriasis is we know that vitamin D3 levels are crucial when it comes to our immune response. And so many different studies that I've seen have shown that when you get your vitamin D3 levels up, your psoriasis gets better or your immune system calms down. It stops reacting the way it is. So yes, we like to supplement with vitamin D3, but there's no supplement for the sun and it is the best possible way to get it. Okay, so how do you get the proper type of sun without sunburn, without getting skin cancer, and those things? And I know that, a lot of medicine has said, if you go out in the sun, you need to use sunscreen. Well, let's look at that recommendation, okay? First thing I like to look at, again, I like to critically think. So if I critically think and I say, okay, since they've been recommending all this sunscreen, and since they've been making everybody go to the dermatologist every year and getting all these things cut off their skin, have we seen less or more skin cancer? And the answer is we're seeing more. So if that was the answer, more sunscreen was the answer to getting rid of skin cancer, we wouldn't have as much skin cancer. So that's my critical thinking point. My second critical thinking is I don't think we're supposed to have to put something on our skin every time we walk outside, especially because it just doesn't make sense in terms of how the world's built. Okay, and then now as I move past critical thinking, I move into the next step, which is, okay, what does the science tells us? Okay, so if we look at sunscreen, I wrote this down because I wanted to get some of these chemicals right. But if we look at sunscreen, 90% of the sunscreens on the market right now have something called octimethyl I knew I was going to mess this up. It's OMC. It's this long, chemical word, and 90% of our sunscreens have that. And we know it can be carcinogenic, but here's something we actually know is that when it heats up, it becomes extremely toxic. So when you put sunscreen on, do you usually get a little hot? Yeah, the sun heats it up and it actually becomes more toxic. So putting sunscreen on, and there's about 5 other different chemicals in most sunscreens that actually go directly into our bloodstream. We've actually proven that they go into the bloodstream. So in essence, putting these chemicals on your skin is increasing your chance of getting not just skin cancer, but all kinds of other cancers. And if you've been watching any of my videos over the past year, you hear me talk about stress. Well, that's a big chemical stress on your body. So putting sunscreen on like that is going to actually stress your body out. It's going to probably make your psoriasis worse, okay? Now, if you don't put sunscreen on, then we have to be smart about how we use the sun, especially if you're not in it a lot. So if you're not in the sun a lot, you've been indoors for the past months, it's been winter time, then when you go outside, give yourself a beginning point. So let's start out about 30 minutes in the sun with as much skin as you can show. Okay, if you can go in your backyard, take your shirt off, do all that kind of stuff, that's perfect. Do it in the part of the day where you're going to get the most sun. So do it at noontime right now. When it's daylight savings, you're going to get about 1 o'clock. But getting on that sun, as much skin as you can show. Okay, so about 30 minutes. Then over time, start to add that up to you're getting an hour a day. Okay, now when you're in the sun, a lot of times it's bright, so we want to put sunglasses on. When we put sunglasses on, what they've shown is that will actually block your body producing as much melanin because your eyes don't notice that you're in the sun. Our body is really cool. It's created to where when the sun comes down and we see it, our body starts to want to help protect you from it. So we get the good from it, but we're also getting that melanin buildup so it doesn't go too intense, okay? And so if you're going to be in the sun for a long period of time, maybe you're playing a sport, or maybe you're going to the beach for the day, then instead of using the normal sunscreens that you would normally buy, you want to go with the sunscreen. Oh, by the way, that sunscreen doesn't block UVA rays in the majority of the time either. It blocks UVB rays, and UVA rays are actually much more dangerous. So there's that. So you want to get a sunscreen that's going to block both UVB and UVA rays that doesn't have any extra chemicals, okay? If you want to know what sunscreen we use and we recommend, I'll put that in the links below. You can click on that. And I'm pretty sure they have it on our Full Scripts account, which gives you a discount on it too. I'm not here to promote sunscreen. I just want to give you guys the tools that you can use. So that's number one. I think the most effective thing we can do is get into the sun every single day. Not only are you getting outside, getting better air, which the studies have shown that outdoor air is actually healthier than indoor air, but you're also getting in the sun. You're probably going to be moving. If you want to take it to the next level, take your shoes off, ground. We've heard me talk about grounding and how beneficial that is. But doing that daily, I've seen that make a huge change for a lot of people with psoriasis. And actually, most of the people I talk to that have psoriasis are indoors all the time on a computer, just the opposite of what I just said. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about are what my thoughts are on oats, wheat, grains, the cereal grains that have become very prevalent. They're very inexpensive. They're in most of our foods. If you want bread, you're going to find it and things like that. And it's become kind of the sad American diet, the standard American diet, but in other cultures as well. Now, I will tell you, as I'm speaking on this topic, I have found that people, when they go to Europe or they go to some other countries other than America, they do a little bit better with these cereal grains and breads. And it's probably because there's less glyphosates and things like that in there, different genetic makeups of it as well. But what do I think about oats, wheat, and other cereal grains? Here's the thing, guys, is, for many years before I even was talking about psoriasis, I was just talking about general health and reducing inflammation. I told everyone to stay away from grains. And I did that for, number one, just at the smallest level. Most of our grains are really refined. And so they're, for the most part, sugar. So if you take wheat and you take that wheat germ out and you use just the spore, then that's going to be mostly sugar. And that's what they usually do with most of your breads that you see at the supermarket on the shelf. Okay, they're mostly just sugar. It creates that quick rush of glucose into the bloodstream. Insulin goes up, and over time that leads to diabetes, metabolic syndromes, and all kinds of things. So I'm not a big fan of grains just because of that. Now, could you say, okay, I'm going to get ancient grains and I'm going to get organic oats and things like that? Yes, you could say that, and you could go that direction. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Actually, before I do, I want to talk about glyphosates. So in America, I know this for sure. I'm not sure about other countries, but in America, for many years, glyphosates or Roundup has been a big part of the farming process, right? And they would use Roundup and they would kill the weeds, okay? And then they would plant the seeds and then they would harvest. Well, in 2008, it was either 2006 or 2008, they started spraying our cereal grains with Roundup at the end of the cycle. So before they were going to pick it, they would spray it, and what that did was dehydrate down the grains, okay? So it would dry them out, and that when they actually harvest them, they were way less likely to mildew, saving a lot of the crop. So it sounds like a good idea. The problem is that glyphosates are essentially an antibiotic, to the human body, and it kills our microbiome. Right? It's been linked to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It's been linked to gut dysbiosis. It's been linked to autism, all different other things that glyphosates have been linked to. And so we saw this huge increase in celiac disease and all these irritable bowel diseases since that 2008 time period when they started doing that with glyphosates. So I'm not a big fan of cereal grains in general. They have studied on organic oats versus non-organic oats and shown that there's way less glyphosates in non-organic oats versus organic oats versus non. So you're going to get a ton of glyphosate in any cereal grain that you get in America that's non-organic. So you want to cut that out 100%. And that means when you go to restaurants, that's what they're using. Okay, and glyphosates kill our gut. Our gut is actually what is the biggest problem with psoriasis. And if I'm talking today kind of like you've watched some of our other videos. So make sure you go back and watch some of my other videos on psoriasis, because it'll fill in some of these gaps. But the next thing is oats in general. So if you have organic oats, what about those? those can be good and they can have a nutrient value, and they do, they can still kind of increase that blood sugar. But if you add a healthy fat to it, like maybe coconut milk or maybe like goat milk, ghee or something like that, it can be healthy. The problem I've noticed though with patients with psoriasis, this is specific towards autoimmune and psoriasis, is when we do stool tests or gut tests for people, the GI mapping test that we do, when I get that test back, there's something called anti-gliadin. It's an antibody that our body is producing. Okay, it's an IgA antibody. And so that's usually very high in people that have an autoimmune disease. And what that means is that when gliadin, which is in all of our cereal grains, I know we talked about gluten a lot, but gliadin, which is in all of our cereal grains, when that gets into our body, if you have antibodies produced that are showing up in that stool test, that means your body's creating an immune response every time you get gliadin in your body. So even if it's organic, your body's still creating that inflammation or that inflammatory response. So I'm a huge fan. I know I took a long way to come around and say why, or to say don't eat grains or don't eat cereal grains, but that's the reasoning why. So for those of you that comment say, no, grains have this, and I agree, but here's the reasons why I would suggest it with psoriasis. If you're someone that wants to get rid of psoriasis, then you're going to do whatever it takes to get rid of it, right? And that's just one thing there. I know it's something that, because it's a part of our culture, it's something we've eaten for so long, it's hard. But guys, if you do things like, if you do our psoriasis course, I teach you how to change it, how to do things that taste great and still are really good for you without these. You still breads, you can still do stuff like that. You just have to make it healthy. Now, just a side note, things like organic jasmine rice, I do like that. I think that's a good addition to things. So if you're really stuck on those grains, that's what I would do with that. So moving on from grains, I hope that made sense. And really, and this is the hard part, is I talk a lot about nutrition, I talk a lot about diet and things like that. And I was just on a virtual consult with a patient just right before I'm shooting this video actually. And her question is like, when you give eating plans to somebody, do they always get better? Does it always get rid of their psoriasis? Or they said, Dr. Kyle, have you had times where you gave somebody an eating plan and it didn't make them better? It didn't get rid of their psoriasis? Absolutely. And that's, so I like to talk about nutrition because it's such a great tool, but it isn't the only aspect of it. And if you watch any of my other videos, I say this a lot, that there's two reasons we talk about nutrition and why it can be such a big piece of the puzzle. So listen to what I said there. It's a piece of the puzzle. Having psoriasis, having an autoimmune disease is rarely just one thing you change and it all goes away. It took me 34 years, or I'd say more like 10 years of me actually trying to get rid of it. The other part of my life, I was just using creams. But it took time and there was pieces of the puzzle, okay? So the eating plan I'm gonna talk about, this is the best eating plan that I've found for helping patients with psoriasis. I know I've heard people do carnivore, I've heard people do keto, I've heard people do, rarely do I hear them do vegetarian and it gets better, but I've heard that too. I've heard of fasting, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But this eating plan is the one that I found to be the most effective. And when it comes to nutrition, sorry, go to step back. When it comes to nutrition, here's how it works. We use nutrition like this. We want to say, okay, what foods can I eat that are going to give me the most nutrient value when I eat them, right? And which foods are going to cause the least amount of stress on my stomach, on my digestive system, and on my body. Meaning, if my body creates inflammation when I eat that food, that's creating stress. I want to avoid it. Okay. Now there's certain foods in general that no matter who you are, it's going to create inflammation, which is why I say go gluten-free, go wheat-free, don't use the oats and the wheat and the grains, because that's going to create inflammation in most people based on how that was created here in our country, in America. But at the same time, same thing with sugar, cane sugar. I had somebody say, can I have juice on a regular basis? And I said, well, you can have, if you squeeze that piece of fruit and drink it right away, or squeeze that vegetable and drink it right away, that can have a lot of nutrients and minerals and things like that in there for you. But if you eat it, 5 days, drink it 5 days later, or you get it from the grocery store, it's really just fructose. It's really just sugar, even if they didn't add sugar in there. So for anybody, that's not going to be a healthy choice. That's going to create inflammation. Same with the bad fats versus good fats. I've talked about that a lot. But this is the eating plan. So without further ado, all right, we got this right here. It's just a print off of it. And if you want this eating plan, I call it the psoriasis eating plan. It's something I created, not because I'm a brilliant person, I just sat and prayed and God gave me this eating plan. I wish I could say that was the case. No, I just took other eating plans. I put them together on what I thought would do best, okay? And so I took, to not reinvent the wheel, I looked at, hey, what are foods that I know are hard to digest? So I looked at Dr. Gundry's plant paradox diet. Those foods that he's taken out are the foods that are really hard on our GI tract. So I say, let's take those out. And then I said, okay, most people with psoriasis, a good portion of us, have had something called SIBO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And there's certain foods that feed that. And so I said, okay, let's take out the FODMAP foods, okay? So I have Plant Paradox and the FODMAP diet put together in a psoriasis eating plan. That's as simple as that. And I've shown it to be the most effective for the majority of people. Are there some people that I work with that still are just doing carnivore? Yes, and they're doing very well with it. But again, everybody's different. There's so many good benefits to broccoli, to a lot of these cruciferous vegetables for our liver detoxification pathways and antioxidant effects and everything else. So I am a big fan of still having vegetables in your diet. So if you're someone that went carnivore and it helped your psoriasis, I recommend starting to add some things back in on the long term. Because here's the thing, when we go full carnivore or full keto, our brain is about 20% of our energy from our body, our brain uses. And that energy comes from glucose. And glucose is sugar, right? And so sugar is actually something our body needs and needs to eat. So no carb, meaning no vegetables, no anything else, isn't actually a good idea in the long term. It might be something that helped you heal in the short term, meaning if you had a gut issue and you took fruit out, then and you healed, that's a good thing. But fruit is actually something that's very beneficial for us and can be really good for your gut once it gets into a healing place. I hope that makes sense. So I like this eating plan because it really does hone in on, yes, these are the types of foods you need to eat, the quality of food you need to eat, grass-fed, free-range, organic type stuff, but it also gets rid of the stuff that's probably going to be hard for most people to eat. And then what I tell people is I say, take this psoriasis eating plan and then make sure you don't eat anything raw. Okay, and so when you have your vegetables, you want to cook the vegetables to a place where they're kind of like this light, bright green color, soft enough to chew, but not mushy, so you still get a good nutrient value. A lot of times that actually helps you get more nutrients, but it makes it so much easier on our GI tract. Let's talk about fasting. This is a fun one because fasting is like this, it's something that's been around obviously forever, but there's so many reasons people fast. There's so many ways people think of fasting, how they fast, what they call fasting. It's just all over the place. And it also became kind of famous. It's like this, if you fast, you're going to have apoptosis and your cancer is going to go away and this is going to go away and your autoimmune responses will disappear. You're going to lose weight. Of course, if you don't eat, you're going to lose weight, but seems pretty simple. But it became really popular, but it's actually really confusing. And what's interesting is the people that have been talking on YouTube and things like that about fasting for the last couple years, 2 to 3 years, they're changing their view. They're changing what they're saying about it. And you see that, you saw this with carnivore too. They're starting to eat vegetables now. And so I will say that when you're watching a lot of these videos, even the stuff that I'm teaching here, that none of this stuff is a perfect science. And I think when you're doing these things and you're learning this stuff, you also want to critically think your way through it, okay? So I'll take what I know about physiology and how the body responds to certain things, what I know about fasting and how the body responds, and I'm going to critically think about whether or not you should do this. The reason I don't talk a lot about fasting is I do believe, 100% believe this, it needs to be individualized and it's not something I would recommend for everybody. So it's hard to shoot a video about it. So that's the first thing I say about fasting is if you think fasting is for you, maybe give yourself, instead of a full 24-hour fast, start with the simple stuff like what they call intermittent or time scheduled or whatever it's called, fasting, which is essentially you're going to eat breakfast and then you're going to eat dinner, or you're going to go breakfast, lunch, and dinner with no snacking in between. Okay, so it's time interval eating. And so that gives your body a time to not have food into it. And also, if you think about it, if you eat dinner at 8 o'clock and you don't eat again until 8 o'clock the next day, that's 12 hours without food. So all of us at some level are going without food. It's when we want to try to do these big fasts because we heard it can help with autoimmune disease, and it absolutely can. I've heard some really cool stories of people fasting and their autoimmune disease going away. But here's the thing, because their body will start to heal itself. But after you stop fasting, there's a lot of stuff you need to change, and that's where the other videos come in. However, I also know that when we fast, it's stress. And if you put stress on your body, it produces cortisol, adrenaline, it does all these things, and it does produces those things to produce more sugar into your system because your body needs that for energy because it's not getting it, so it's pulling more sugar out of the system. In other words, you're getting stress hormones consistently going out of your body, or come to your body. If you're someone that has adrenal fatigue, for women, because of how your hormones work, when your cortisol levels go up, your progesterone is going to come down, meaning it's going to affect your estrogen, it's going to affect your other female hormones, and so that might be a really bad thing for a lot of women. So I don't typically recommend women to go big fasting. There are some specific books out there for women in fasting. If you do it, at least read those books, but I think it should be individualized. So I think a long way of saying, I think fasting is great, but I'm not going to promote it on this channel and say everybody go fast. I think if you think it's good for you, work with a doctor and make sure that you're doing it properly, and make sure you've had testing in the past of what your hormones are doing, how healthy your liver is, because this is a big player in whether or not you should fast, and what your stress levels and adrenal health is like as well. All right, so now I want to dive into some of the questions and the comments actually that we get on this channel, and just answering some of them. I wrote them down. I actually made the mistake of not writing the people who sent them to me's name down. Next time I do this, I'll do that, but I can't find them on here. So I'm just going to answer them for you guys, okay? Because I know these are questions that I get a lot, that a lot of people have. And before I do that, I want to take a step back and go kind of shift to the beginning of this video when I talked about light. I'm a huge fan of, obviously, the sun, but I'm also a huge fan of infrared lights. And we use an infrared light called Lumebox, okay? And Lumebox is, it's very good. It has infrared, near infrared light, which goes through water, okay? So far infrared and mid infrared aren't gonna go through water, meaning it won't get deep into your body. But near infrared does, and it is amazing for overall health. It will reflect off the metals in our body, the iron, the chromium, the copper, and things like that. And actually, light is how our nervous system cells talk to each other. It's pretty cool. And so infrared light has so many health benefits. I'm not going to spend too much time on it today. But if you're interested in infrared light, we've finally got a discount code from Lumebox for any of our people watching on here and for our patients. So I'll put the Lumebox link in there as well, and you can get you a Lumebox. They're really cool. You can get handheld ones where you just hold it, or you can get big, huge ones as well. So let's talk about these comments, okay? My first one is dairy. Dairy is such an interesting thing to me. It really is. Like, just the concept of it is interesting. Like, if you think again, I like to critically think, so I like to take a step back and like, does this make sense? Get rid of the science, get rid of all that stuff, and just say, does it make sense? And then start thinking about the science. So dairy, just think about that. So when we're born, we have breast milk, or we should have breast milk. We know 100% that's the best thing for a baby. For really the first 2 years of their life, they need to be getting breast milk for a lot of reasons, for their immune system, for their gut health, all these things, to grow. But you look at cows, and their babies, do cow's milk, right? And the goats, and they do goat's milk. And all these animals drink milk, these mammals drink milk, but they don't do it for the rest of there's a lot of nutrients in milk, and obviously it's one of the healthiest things on the planet. But it does just kind of seem weird, like, do we really need to drink milk for the rest of our lives? I don't know the answer to that. I don't think we do. I think it's kind of weird, but there is nutrient value to dairy, and I know that so many people love it. It becomes a huge part of our culture. So I want to talk about it because there is good dairy, there is bad dairy, and there is, hey, I have psoriasis, or I have an autoimmune disease. Should I eat dairy, or should I drink or eat dairy? And those are kind of the three questions I want to address. So number one is, if you're going to eat dairy, so if you've settled on it, this is what I'm going to do, make sure you do it this way, okay? Number one, make sure it's quality dairy, meaning the cow was raised the way a cow is supposed to be raised. A cow should eat grass and greens and things out in a field where it's moving around and moving throughout its life. Not corn, not grains, not all these other things that most conventional places feed them. So number one, it needs to be organic, free range, 100% grass-fed and finished. Number two, well, I guess it's not finished if it's a dairy cow, but grass-fed. Number two is you want to make sure it's not pasteurized. And I know that's like, wait, aren't we going to get sick? No, guys, you're not going to get sick. That's actually just what they did more as a marketing or a business aspect of milk, so it can be preserved and other reasons. But when they highly heat, when they homogenize and they pasteurize this milk, that heating process kills off a lot of the enzymes that you use to digest that milk. For instance, lactase gets killed off, and now you're not digesting lactose very well. Plus, you kill off all those enzymes, and essentially what's left in this bottle of pasteurized milk especially if you take all the fat out, like skim milk, it's pretty much just lactose. It's pretty much just sugar, okay? And as you take that sugar and you're drinking or you're putting it in cereal or whatnot, it's just horrible for insulin resistance and things like that. And that's why I'm not a big fan of whey protein either, because it's a similar concept. So number one is, if you're gonna drink it, that's what you do. If you're gonna eat cheese, make sure, again, organic, raw, and raised properly, okay? Now, should you eat it in terms of, is it gonna be beneficial for you if you're really trying to get rid of an autoimmune disease? My answer to that's going to be no. And there's research, I know I've read things that, kefir and yogurt and fermented dairy can be very beneficial for your gut. And yes, it can be. But from my experience, I can only tell you what I've experienced working with patients, looking at a lot of stool tests. And I'm just seeing, like, when you take certain things out, people get better, and when you don't, they don't. Dairy is one of those things that, even fermented, I found that it actually, when we get people off of fermented food, I've seen psoriasis go away more than than in the past when I used to put people on fermented foods. Okay, and so that's part of the reason I say that. Number two is and when I do food allergy testing, IgG, food allergy testing, okay, or sensitivity, whatever you want to call it, your body's creating an IgG immune response, creating inflammation when you eat it. Most people have a dairy or a cow milk allergy to that, or an IgG response to that. So when they drink milk, they're creating inflammation. Less people have a goat milk allergy. So if you really want to try dairy, maybe you go with goat's milk or sheep's milk. But if it's me and I'm not doing a bunch of testing, and I'm not doing IgG testing yet or any of that, I'm just going to take dairy out. To me, it's like, again, nutrition is supposed to be best nutrients and minerals as you can get, and not putting stress on your body. So if I think something's going to stress my body out and I'm trying to get rid of psoriasis because it's awful and at varying degrees for different people. I've heard people who I just talked to a lady 45 years of having psoriasis and she's miserable. And then I talk to people like, yeah, it's not that big of a deal. I just don't want to take the drugs and I want to, be healthier. So depending on you, but the truth is that I would just take out dairy. Okay, and that's kind of all I have to really say about that. So next on the comments or questions that we get is, should I eat fruit with psoriasis? And that's a great question. It really is. Fruit's amazing. It's very healthy for us. I kind of think of fruit as, again, critical thinking. So if I say, okay, look at our earth, look at our plant, look at the stuff around us to eat. The highest sugar content is fruit. So I kind of think it's like, okay, we have, our meat, which is like kind of a mainstay. We have our vegetables for helping digestion, helping, antioxidants and things like that, detoxification pathways. And then I think of fruit as like the dessert on the tree, right? It's like, they don't have cake trees or donut trees or cookie trees. We have apples. And if you think about it, that's like kind of like a dessert. So I think it's great. And I think it's very healthy. I know it's very healthy. And for people that have a good, healthy digestive system, the polysaccharides and all this, the stuff in there is amazing for your gut bacteria. However, if you have gut infections like yeast overgrowth or bacterial overgrowth, if you have liver issues, for instance, like if you have a very sluggish liver, or even to the point of cirrhosis, then I would stay away from fruit, because fruit is high fructose and that's 100% digested in your liver. It's going to put stress on the liver. If you know you have bacterial overgrowth, or you have yeast, I would stay away from fruit, because that fructose is going to feed that bacteria and that yeast. So it's individualized. But if I would say, okay, most people with psoriasis, I try to limit fruit because of that reason right there, because typically there's a digestive issue that's just not a good place for them to have a lot of it. Or if you're going to do fruit, I do the low fructose fruits, right? So those low fructose fruits are going to be your strawberries, your blueberries, blackberries, your raspberries, apricots are really low in fructose as well. And staying away from bananas, apples, things that are really high in fructose. All right, so the final comment I want to talk to you guys about today is, does psoriasis cause MS? Somebody heard that it can cause MS. I had viewer, subscriber ask if psoriasis causes Hashimoto's, okay, or other autoimmune diseases. And the truth is no, psoriasis doesn't cause any of those things. Essentially, psoriasis, guys, let's take a step back and look at what it is. Psoriasis is when our immune system becomes overactive in its response because of too much stress over time, and it's because of the genetic step, it shifts into this immune response that causes your skin cells to grow too quickly, and it creates this plaquing on there. That's what's happening. So if we say, okay, what's it doing to my body? And it can also go to the joints. It can start affecting the joints and psoriatic arthritis, things like that. So what's happening in your body is your immune system is going haywire, meaning constant inflammation. If If you have constant inflammation, that's going to systemically affect you. It's going to affect everything in your body, which is why psoriasis is linked to heart disease. It's linked to blood pressure issues. It's linked to diabetes. It's linked to cancer. It's linked to pretty much all these other diseases that are linked to metabolic disorders and inflammation, okay? So does it cause MS and Hashimoto's? No, it doesn't cause it. It does put more stress on the body, and when you have one autoimmune response, you're susceptible to other autoimmune responses for the reason that your body's in an inflamed state, right? So do you see it commonly happen with psoriasis? Yes, I see Hashimoto's the most. MS, I have seen that be something that somebody moves into. I've also seen patients that were diagnosed with MS first, then they started getting psoriasis, and same thing with Hashimoto's. They had Hashimoto's and then they started getting psoriasis. I actually researched Hashimoto's a little bit to see if the thyroid dysfunction causes psoriasis, and to date, from what I read, there's no really perfect link there. I will say, hormone levels actually have an impact on psoriasis. So not necessarily the thyroid hormone, but progesterone levels and going up and estrogen going up have been linked to having less psoriasis, or your psoriasis getting better. So there's that. But no, I don't think it causes MS or it doesn't cause Hashimoto's. All right, hey, thanks for watching, guys. And I want to just say this, that if you have psoriasis, it's not an end of the road for you. It's not something you can't get rid of. It isn't something you can cure, because there's no such thing as a cure, but it is something you can get your body in balance and heal from. So please watch the rest of the videos that I've created. I did those for a reason. And reach out to me, connect with me, set up a consult if you'd like. Do the psoriasis course. We've seen amazing results with that. And some people can just do that and get great results. If you want any of these things I've talked about today, we'll have these in the comments. If you want to do any of the supplements we recommend, we'll have how you can get those at 15% off as well in the comments. All right, you guys have an awesome day.